Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive with us. Today we are heading to mid-20th century Baltimore
Oh, yeah.
to uncover a fascinating story about how a northern city became a hotbed
For
for
the Southern style.
Southern-style politics. Yeah,
Really interesting stuff.
yeah. And our guide for this journey is Kenneth Durr and his article, When Southern Politics Came North.
It's a fantastic study.
Yeah,
Really throws a wrench into that whole assumption that, geography
right.
dictates ideology, north versus south.
Yeah, it's not that simple.
Yeah, not at all.
So Durr focuses on Baltimore between 1940 and 1964.
Okay.
Which is a time of just massive shifts in the American landscape.
Right.
How did this city, known for its industrial prowess and its
Mm.
diverse population, become a breeding ground for this conservative
Mm.
Southern-influenced politics? What role did the white working class play in all of this?
Well, Durr's research suggests that it was a perfect storm of factors.
Oh, okay.
Convergence of, class anxieties, racial tensions. This influx of Southern migrants
Yeah.
all played a role in shaping Baltimore's political scene.
So really like a microcosm of the larger political realignment
Exactly.
that was happening across the nation.
A microcosm.
So let's paint a picture of Baltimore in 1940
Okay.
before we really get into these specifics. What was the social and political climate like?
So picture this. Bustling port city,
Yeah.
a hub of industry, attracting workers from all over.
A melting pot, in a sense.
It really was.
Yeah.
And importantly, it had a larger black population than many other northern cities,
Okay.
which, that created some unique social and political dynamics right there.
Sure.
And politically, the city's landscape was largely controlled by this thing called the democratic machine.
A democratic machine.
Yeah.
Can you break that down for us a bit?
Sure. So back then, some cities had these powerful political organizations, usually within the Democratic Party,
Right.
that basically maintained control for decades. They used patronage favors and sometimes less than legal tactics
Sure.
to keep their grip on power. And in Baltimore, this machine
Yeah.
often aligned itself with the interests of Southern segregationists.
So even though Baltimore was a northern city,
Yeah,
there were already these threads
exactly.
connecting it to Southern politics,
Already
at
connected.
least among the
Right.
ruling elite.
Precisely. And this underlying connection becomes really significant as we move into the 1940s.
Oh.
You've got World War II brought about this huge economic boom, and with it,
Right.
an influx of white Southerners seeking opportunity.
I mean, for jobs.
Exactly. They wanted jobs, and they found them in Baltimore's booming industries.
Wow.
Think, Bethlehem Steel, Glen Martin aircraft plants,
Oh, wow.
places that were just experiencing explosive growth
Yeah.
thanks to wartime production.
And Durr even highlights this story about one of these migrants, a man named Harry Isner,
Right.
who testified before Congress about his aspirations to settle in Baltimore permanently.
Wow.
Really embodies the American dream,
Yes.
looking for opportunity and...
Absolutely. But this influx of Southerners
Right.
didn't happen in a vacuum, right?
Of course not. No.
It intersected with these existing racial dynamics in Baltimore, which, like much of the nation at the time, was still deeply segregated.
Right. And Durr mentions that, not
Yeah.
just Southern migrants, but also Baltimore's native-born white working class,
Yeah.
many of whom are Catholic immigrants.
Right.
They were all invested in maintaining this
The color line.
color line.
Yeah.
Segregation wasn't just a Southern phenomenon.
It's a national thing.
Yeah, it was very much a national thing.
And it was.
Both groups saw it as a way to protect their own
Yeah.
jobs and status within the social hierarchy.
Okay.
The color line, as Durr points out,
Mhm.
became this common denominator, this shared experience
Wow.
that helped forge a bond between those Southern newcomers.
And the existing white working class, despite their different backgrounds.
Yeah, and how did this play out in the workplace? Durr highlights this example of the Western Electric plant,
Oh, yeah.
where attempts at desegregating restrooms
Right.
led to protests and even strikes.
The Western Electric case is a stark illustration of how racial anxieties could erupt,
Oh, wow.
even in a northern city experiencing significant social change.
Right.
The company's initial attempts to integrate restrooms
Yeah.
were met with fierce resistance from white workers, many of whom are recent Southern arrivals.
And Durr even quotes
Yeah.
a black woman worker who, amidst these tensions,
Oh, wow.
reportedly called the white workers.
Yeah.
Poor white trash.
It's a powerful phrase that
Yeah.
speaks volumes about the simmering racial tensions of the era.
And also the class dynamics
Absolutely.
that were at play there, too.
It sheds light on the complex class dynamics at play, for sure.
Yeah.
Both the Southern migrants and the city's established white workers
Right.
saw Black workers as a potential threat to their economic security.
Interesting.
This shared anxiety, fueled by racial prejudice,
Yeah.
ultimately trumped that initial push for integration,
Wow.
and a compromise was reached that allowed for de facto segregation.
So the seeds of discontent and racial division were already being sown,
Yeah.
even as the war effort continued.
Yeah.
But how did this evolve in the post-war period?
Yeah.
Did the economic prosperity at the time do anything
Yeah.
to quell these anxieties?
That's where things get even more complicated.
Oh.
The post-war era saw a booming economy in Baltimore.
Right.
And many working-class families, including those Southern migrants like
Yeah.
Harry Isner,
Yeah.
did see a marked improvement in their living standards.
Okay.
In fact, Isner went on to start his own home improvement business,
Wow.
a true testament to his ambition and resilience.
It seems like the American dream was
Oh.
within reach for many.
It was for some.
Yeah. But did this newfound prosperity change the racial landscape of the city?
You know, that's a great question. And the answer is not as straightforward as you might think.
Okay.
While many benefited from that post-war economic boom, those anxieties didn't just vanish.
Right.
In fact, Baltimore's Black population continued to grow rapidly during this time,
Okay.
putting pressure on historically segregated neighborhoods.
So those anxieties were still there.
Oh yeah, those anxieties were simmering.
Yeah.
This growth fueled anxieties amongst many white residents
Wow.
who feared losing their communities and way of life.
And this reminds me of a quote we
Oh.
teased earlier about how row houses breed row minds.
Oh, yes. That one's a real gem.
What a loaded statement.
Yeah, it speaks volumes about the intertwined nature of class and racial prejudices
Yeah.
that were brewing in Baltimore. We'll delve into that quote
Oh, for sure.
a little bit later.
Great.
But alongside these anxieties,
Yeah.
there was also a degree of cultural exchange happening. Hillbilly culture,
Okay.
as Durr puts it,
Right.
started to weave itself into the fabric of Baltimore.
Oh, so like Southern culture coming up and kind of blending with
Right.
the existing Baltimore culture.
A real blending of cultures.
Can you give us some examples of this cultural integration?
Oh, absolutely. Southern Baptist churches began to sprout up.
Okay.
Country music venues started attracting diverse crowds, and even culinary traditions began to blend.
Oh, wow.
Imagine hillbilly nightclubs popping up
Wow.
alongside, traditional Polish and German bars.
That is a melting pot.
Yeah, it's a testament to the city's dynamic and ever-evolving social landscape.
Fascinating how those moments of cultural exchange and tension
Yeah,
can coexist.
definitely.
But did this cultural blending
Yeah.
translate into a lessening of racial divisions?
Unfortunately, not quite.
Oh.
The fight to maintain segregated neighborhoods and schools remained a potent force, especially in South Baltimore.
Good.
The arrival of Black families in these areas was seen as a direct threat by many white residents. And this, my friend, is
Yeah.
where we start to see the seeds of what would later be termed the white backlash.
And what event really served as a catalyst for this backlash?
Well, the landmark Brown v. Board of Education decision in 1954 proved to be a pivotal turning point.
Okay.
Baltimore's decision to integrate its schools,
Wow.
making it the first major city in the nation to do so.
The first.
Yeah,
Wow.
sparked an immediate
Oh,
and
no.
explosive reaction,
Great.
particularly in South Baltimore.
Durr paints a vivid picture
Oh, yeah.
of parent protests erupting across the city.
Absolutely. And what's striking is the language
Okay.
used by some of these protesters. Phrases like segregation is our heritage
Oh, wow.
began appearing,
Yeah.
signaling the influence of Southern political rhetoric
Right.
and the deep-seated nature of racial anxieties.
So taking those cues from the South.
Borrowing that language.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And it wasn't just rhetoric.
No.
Durr highlights the story of Wilma Longmire,
Yeah.
a Tennessee native
Another migrant.
and fervent protester
Wow.
who said, "We just started picketing and didn't care what would happen to us. It was that strong."
That's powerful.
Yeah.
Longmire's quote is a powerful testament to the depth of emotion and conviction behind these protests.
Yeah.
It also underscores the sense of alienation and resentment
Right.
felt by many white working-class
They
residents.
felt like they were losing
They
something.
felt like they were being left behind.
And Durr notes that Baltimore's
Yeah.
civic, religious, and media leaders,
Right.
the so-called best elements,
The establishment.
yeah, they condemned the protests,
They did.
which only served to further isolate and anger
Yeah.
those who felt like their voices weren't being heard.
Precisely this condemnation only deepened the divide between the white working class and the city's elite, feeding into that growing sense of resentment and distrust.
So this backlash, did it remain confined to protest?
Yeah.
Or did it spill over into the political arena?
It most certainly did. In the 1954 Maryland gubernatorial race, we see figures like State Senator George Della
Okay.
openly campaigning on a segregationist platform.
Oh, wow.
His success, particularly in white working-class areas,
Yeah.
demonstrated the growing political power of this burgeoning conservatism fueled by racial anxieties.
Yeah, and Della's victory also exposes this dilemma
Yeah.
faced by labor unions
Oh, yeah.
who were caught between supporting
Right.
pro-labor candidates and risking alienating their white working class base.
Tough spot to be in.
Yeah, real tough spot.
It highlights the complex interplay between class and racial politics that was taking shape.
Yeah.
This sense that the government was no longer on the side of the average working person,
Right.
that it was more concerned with appeasing minorities, and
Hey.
liberal elites began to take root.
So we're starting to see those early tremors
Really
of
tremor.
a major political shift.
Yeah, those tremor.
How did these sentiments evolve as we move into the 1960s?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Yeah.
That's where we'll pick up next time.
All right, so stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Sounds good. As we head into the 1960s, you know those tremors you mentioned?
Yeah.
They start to feel more like an earthquake.
Oh, wow.
White working class grievances expanded beyond just, racial anxieties.
Okay.
It was this broader sense of unease and frustration
Yeah.
with the direction of the country.
What were some of those grievances that extended beyond race?
Well, they were concerned about rising crime rates,
Okay.
what they perceived as, the erosion of religious values and just this general feeling that the American dream was slipping away.
Right.
This sense of being left behind, of being forgotten by the
Yeah.
government and elites. It started to fuel a really potent populist resentment.
Ah, and this is where that quote about row houses breeding row minds comes into play.
Yeah.
Right. It's a particularly...
Let's unpack that quote.
Yeah, what a loaded statement.
It was uttered by a woman from North Baltimore,
Okay.
which is a more affluent area.
Right.
And it reveals this sense of disdain, this belief that working class folks, especially those in areas like South Baltimore, were somehow less sophisticated,
Oh, wow.
less intelligent,
Less than...
even less human.
Wow.
It's a stark reminder
Yeah.
of the classism that often runs parallel to racial prejudice.
Absolutely. It's about who has power,
Exactly.
who gets a voice, and who gets dismissed.
And this feeling of being dismissed, of not having their concerns addressed,
Right.
really fueled the fire of that populist resentment.
Were there any specific events or policies that further inflamed these sentiments?
Absolutely. Durr highlights the Supreme Court's decision banning school-sanctioned prayer
Oh, yeah.
in 1963.
Okay.
For many working-class families in Baltimore, particularly those with strong religious convictions,
Right.
this was seen as a direct attack on their faith, their values.
Wow. Their way of life.
It's interesting how something like school prayer
Right.
can become a flashpoint,
It can.
a symbol of a much larger
Absolutely.
cultural and political struggle.
It's a perfect example of how seemingly abstract issues can resonate deeply with people's everyday lives and beliefs.
Right.
This decision for many confirmed that the government was overstepping its bounds, that it was becoming this intrusive force hostile to their values.
So this sense of alienation, this distrust of the government,
Yeah.
it was already simmering in Baltimore
It was brutal.
before the arrival of a certain figure on the national stage.
Here he comes.
Yeah,
And that figure, of course, was George Wallace.
George Wallace.
His entry into the 1964 Maryland Democratic presidential primary
Okay.
threw a Molotov cocktail into an already volatile political landscape.
So remind us a bit about Wallace and his platform.
Sure.
He was a staunch segregationist.
He was.
Yeah.
But what made Wallace so potent, so dangerous.
Yeah, was his ability to tap into those simmering anxieties.
Right.
We've been discussing both racial and economic.
Right.
His campaign rhetoric wasn't just about segregation.
It was more than that.
It was a masterclass in populist appeal.
How so?
Well, he positioned himself as the champion of the little guy,
Okay.
the working man who was being squeezed
Right.
by big government, by liberal elites, and social changes he didn't understand or agree with.
So he was tapping into this feeling of being left behind.
He was offering these simple solutions to complex problems.
Okay.
Often by, scapegoating minorities and painting this picture of a country under siege by forces that wanted to destroy its traditional values.
And Durr mentions that Wallace's rhetoric resonated.
Yeah.
Even in a place like Maryland.
It did.
Which wasn't traditionally considered part of the Deep South.
That's the remarkable thing about Wallace's campaign.
Yeah.
He was able to bridge these regional divides and tap into this shared vein of anxiety.
Oh, wow.
That ran through the white working class regardless of geography.
So it wasn't just a Southern thing.
No, it transcended geography.
More than that.
He blended those classic Southern appeals to states' rights with a more modern populist message that spoke to those economic anxieties and that fear of cultural change.
And what about his opponents?
Yeah.
How did they counter his message?
That's the fascinating part.
Okay.
Many of them struggled to effectively respond to Wallace's populist appeal.
Really?
They often came across as condescending or dismissive.
Oh, wow.
Further alienating the very voters they were trying to win over.
Can you give us an example?
One striking instance was when the Archdiocese of Baltimore condemned Wallace as a law-defying racist and declared that no patriotic American could support him.
Oh, wow.
Talk about backfiring.
Yeah, that sounds like it probably backfired.
It likely did. Instead of engaging with the real concerns of Wallace's supporters, it reinforced this idea that the establishment looked down on them, dismissing their anxieties and beliefs.
It's a classic example of how failing to understand and address people's genuine concerns, even if expressed through the lens of prejudice, can drive them further into the arms of someone like Wallace.
Absolutely. It created this dynamic of us versus them, with Wallace as the champion of the forgotten working class against the elites who looked down on them.
And when we look at the results of the 1964 Maryland Democratic primary, it becomes clear just how effectively Wallace was able to exploit this dynamic.
He did a good job of that.
Yeah. What were the results?
He garnered an impressive 42.7% of the vote.
Oh, wow.
In Maryland. Largely due to overwhelming support from blue-collar, white, working-class neighborhoods.
Wow. So he almost won the state.
He almost did.
Wow.
And as Durr points out, Brewster only managed to win the city overall because of incredibly high voter turnout in the Black community.
Wow, without that turnout.
He might have actually won the entire city.
Wow.
It was a close call. And it revealed a city deeply divided along racial lines. White working-class voters, fueled by anxieties and resentment, flocked to Wallace, while Black voters, who recognized the danger he represented, overwhelmingly supported Brewster.
It's almost like two different cities.
Two different worlds. Durr paints this vivid scene of workers in Glen Burnie, which was a Wallace stronghold, going to the polls with big grins on their faces and voting with relish.
Wow.
It captures the sense of both enthusiasm and defiance, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
And it underscores the profound impact of Wallace's message.
Right.
He had given them a voice, someone who, in their eyes, understood their struggles and spoke to their concerns.
It's easy to look back on these events and label them as simply white backlash.
Right.
But Durr's research encourages us to dig deeper.
To go beyond those simple labels.
Yeah, to understand that complex interplay of factors that led to this political shift.
These weren't just knee-jerk reactions to desegregation.
Right.
They were rooted in genuine concerns about economic security, cultural identity, and a sense of belonging.
Concerns that were
ripe for exploitation.
Yeah, skillfully exploited by politicians like Wallace.
Absolutely.
So what does this all mean?
Yeah.
What lasting impact
Big question.
do these events have on Baltimore and the nation as a whole?
That's where Durr leaves us with some profound questions to ponder. Was this truly just a white backlash, as many labeled it at the time?
Right.
Or was it something more nuanced?
Yeah.
Were white working-class voters simply finding a voice that resonated with their concerns?
A voice that had been...
A voice that had been ignored or dismissed by the political establishment. A voice that had been ignored or dismissed, by the political establishment.
Yeah.
It's striking how relevant Durr's research feels today, you know?
Yeah.
It's a reminder that political affiliations aren't static.
They can change.
They can and do change. They're often shaped by this complex web of personal experiences, anxieties, and aspirations.
Yeah.
People vote based on who they believe is fighting for them,
right?
Who understands their struggles and who offers solutions, even if those solutions are simplistic or divisive.
Right. And in Baltimore in 1964, George Wallace, despite his, flaws and divisive rhetoric, he managed to tap into those emotions.
He did.
In a way that his opponents simply couldn't.
He became a voice for those who felt voiceless.
Even if that voice was rooted in, resentment and a longing for a past that couldn't be recaptured.
And that's the crux of it, isn't it?
Yeah.
Understanding how a figure like Wallace, with his overtly racist platform could gain such traction in a northern city reveals those deep-seated anxieties and resentments that were simmering beneath the surface of American society.
Yeah, it's not just about race, right?
It's not.
It's about all these other things, too.
It's about class. It's about economics. It's about culture.
Yeah, and Durr's study isn't just about Baltimore, right?
Yeah.
It's a microcosm of a
larger political transformation.
Yeah, happening across the country.
Absolutely.
So we've gone from segregated restrooms to a city on the verge of a political earthquake in just a couple of decades.
That's fast.
It's a stark reminder of how quickly things can change.
Things can change quickly.
And how deeply intertwined these issues of race, class, and power truly are.
Durr doesn't offer any easy answers.
No.
But he leaves us with a powerful lens through which to view not only the past, but also the present.
So how can we apply these lessons today?
He challenges us to dig deeper, to move beyond those simplistic labels, and to grapple with the complex realities that shape political identities and affiliations.
I think that's a perfect note to end on. This deep dive into Kenneth Durr's When Southern Politics Came North.
What a task.
Has been eye-opening, to say the least.
It has.
We've uncovered this hidden chapter in American history.
Right.
That sheds light on the roots of white working-class conservatism.
And how these forces continue to shape our political landscape.
Exactly, still today.
Absolutely. The past is never truly past right.
It rhymes.
It rhymes. It informs our present, and it shapes our future.
And by understanding those complexities of history, by listening to the voices
of those who felt and perhaps still feel left behind,
we can begin to bridge those divides.
Exactly.
That threaten to tear us apart.
It's a call to action.
Yeah.
For all of us to engage in thoughtful dialogue, to listen with empathy, and to seek solutions that address the root causes of inequality and injustice.
Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been my pleasure.
We encourage you to continue exploring these complex issues.
Oh, yeah, keep learning.
Or to engage in constructive dialogue with those who hold different viewpoints.
Absolutely.
Until next time.
See you then.